So here we are in the lab. I've already gone and logged into the XtremIO Station's web interface, and we're going to start doing some configuration. So the first thing that we would normally do would be to go over to administration, and if you're going to use iSCSI, we'll go ahead and do the configuration for that right now. And let's see, it's over here on the left called iSCSI Network Configuration under the Cluster tab, pretty obvious. And then you can come in and on the right, you can add your IP addresses. You create what are called portals, basically. So we'll click Add. And under this drop down, under Target Port, is the controller, the physical port on the controller. So this is a single XBRIC. We have two controllers, 2 ports each. So controller 1, controller 2, or controller 1, port 2, controller 2, port 1, port 2. So you'll pick which one you want, and then you'll punch in an IP using let's see, .20/24 using slash notation. So the IP address slash the subnet mask in slash notation for that network. The port and the VLAN cannot be changed. The current version of code, this one is 2.3. As of 2.3, you can't change VLAN. It does not support frame tagging. So you have to make sure and configure your switches properly. So look for that in a later release, I guess. Hit OK, and it'll add the IP for the port, and it'll show you the target name here. And excuse the scrolling due to the resolution. If we open that, you'll see it. You can have, again, scroll. You can have multiple IP addresses on the same port. Like that. So you would go through and configure all the ports on all the controllers as you see fit, and then connect to them from your iSCSI initiators. You can also set up an iSCSI routing table. Now I'm going to tell you I don't recommend routing iSCSI, but you can. So you can give it a name, demo route, destination, subnet, and subnet bits. So again, you could do like 10, 10, 100, 0 with a /24, and it's going to ask you for the next hop IP address. You click OK, and you will build that routing table. So again, don't recommend it, but you can do it. The only other thing that we really set ahead of time is one on cluster limits. So there is a thin provisioning soft limit, and it's not really a limit, but it will trigger the VAI, which remember is the vSphere API's thin provisioning space threshold warning. So it'll basically warn you in the vCenter interface that you're starting to hit a limit. By default, I believe this is still default, it is set for 100%. So once you 100% thin provision, it will send a warning. I was going to see if there was a default button, but there isn't. It will send a warning up to vCenter. So you can turn that off, or you can change the percentage. So next, we'll just start carving up storage. So to do that, we go to the configuration icon. So the way this display works is your volumes or LUNs are on the left, your hosts are on the right. And in a normal case of workflow, you would add your host first. So these things listed here are what are known as initiator groups. Each one specifies a host with multiple initiators. So for number vSphere host 23 in our lab, he has 2 fiber channel initiators that we have added here. If you want to add a new host, we just click add. We can do like demo host. And then we add here to add initiators. So the first thing you need to add is, the initiator name. Often for fiber channel, you'll have 2 ports per host, one on A fabric, one on B. So I sometimes will name them A and B. And then you can pick a drop-down list of initiator addresses. Now this list is populated by hosts that are zoned to the XtremIO. So when they get zoned through in your fiber channel fabric, they will log in, and the XtremIO will see them, and they'll show up in the list. I don't have any in the list because all the hosts in my lab are already configured. But let's say you wanted to add a host and you wanted to add the initiator address in ahead of time. You can absolutely come in here and manually type in a big long hex address. There we go. And that will be your initiator. And then you'd probably do another one, demo 1 for B fabric. Let's see if it'll do the colons for me. I've never tried. Oh, it does. And just hit OK. And it does that. Ooh, I don't like that. Also don't like it when I can't type. There we go. Now, to do iSCSI, it's the exact same thing, which I think is kind of nice because often the iSCSI initiator setup is completely different, in a different place in a different part of the UI on most arrays, and this is not the case. So you click Add, you give it a name, and then you paste in the initiator name. So that's an example one from VMware documentation. But that's how you assign iSCSI initiators. So go grab that out of your host, paste it into here, and then when you start connecting LUNs over on the left to hosts on the right, it would do it here both via Fiber Channel and iSCSI at the same time. So you can click Next. You can create a new folder if you want to, and add that to the folder. So we'll close this guy, and then we would see ours there. You click him, he's got his information. You can edit him, you can delete him, select, unselect, show a connection map for which LUNs are connected, rename him, all that good stuff. But to actually do something, we're going to use one of my actual hosts. So we're going to use host 10. So you can click host 10, and you can click this button here, and it'll say he is zoned, or mapped to these 3 LUNs at a minimum. And it shows the ones over here. But we want to add a new LUN. So we want to add a LUN, and you got a couple of options here. First of all, there's a table that lets you manually punch in all the LUNs you want to create. Or you can add multiple at one time, and I'll show you how to do both. So the first LUN or volume will be PS Demo Example 1. Size. Now it gives you some examples. MB for megabyte, G for gig, TB for terabyte. So we could do 1 terabyte. And then it's going to ask you a few questions. So first of all, what is your logical block size? Now, I don't expect you to know the answer to this. What I expect you to do is to go to the XtremIO user guide for your version of code and see what it recommends for your OS. So for right now, it recommends 512 for vSphere, 4K for some Windows OSs, and then older OSs need to be offset so that their writes are aligned with the alignment of the formatting on the XtremIO, and they'll have legacy. But for vSphere, we do 512. Then there is small I/O alerts. So if you're getting I/Os that are a lot smaller than your block size, and it's happening a lot, it will alert you, because that means you could change this and have better performance. Unaligned. So older OSs would not properly align themselves to the underlying physical disk structure. Basically, they would do like a write that would actually cross 2 sector boundaries. So one write would actually be 2 writes on the back-end storage. One read would be 2 reads. Most modern OSs automatically align, but some do not, or if you select the wrong configurations. So if you want it to detect that, say enable, and it will alert you within the console here. And then the third one is the VAAI thin provisioning alerts that we configured a minute ago for the cluster. If you want to send those for this particular volume, you just say enabled there. So if you wanted to, you could then create a different one. EX2, do 500 megabyte, and same things here. And then if you wanted to add a bunch that are the same, you could say I want to add 5 of them, PS Demo EX, and then I want to add an index number at the end, start at 3. What size do I want? 500 megabyte. What logical block size? What alerts? And there you go, and it fills those in. And down at the bottom, it always shows logical and physical storage. So we hit next. It says, where do you want to put these guys? I'm going to create a new folder to put them in. And there we go. Finish. Okay, so it created them. Remember, everything's already formatted. When we create a new volume, it's a metadata operation. There's really nothing that happens to the disk. It's just all done in memory since metadata is kept in memory. So this is 2.3 code. I do not have snapshots in this code. That is coming in 2.4, and 2.4 wasn't out when I did this recording. Didn't quite make it. But you would be able to select an existing volume and create a snap. And really, within XtremIO, a snapshot is another volume. It is it's basically a metadata operation. Just like when we created these a minute ago and it added all the metadata for these LUNs, since there was no data on them, nothing happened to disk. When I create a snapshot, if you remember, let's say this LUN here had a bunch of data on it and I create a snapshot, all I'm doing is adding a second set of pointers or a third set, however many, to the metadata engine that signifies that snapshot, and it will show up like another LUN. And you can map it over to one of the servers here like we'll do with this physical volume right there. So treat them just like they would regular volumes. You can create them, delete them. You can create snaps of other snaps. You can show all snapshots from this point in time forward, and you can show the snapshot hierarchy. So the selections are in here. I just can't show them to you yet, but at the end of the day, it really is like managing any other volume. So while we're here, you can do things like move them to folders, delete them, rename them. If you modify them, it just shows you the same settings. Right click again, refresh, display any alerts, and all that. But let's say we want to map all of these guys to this host over here. So one way you can do it is to select them, drag them, and drop them, and it will map them. Another way to do it is select these and select all the ones you want to map them to. If you have multiple hosts you want to map them to, we only have one. And then you can just do the map all command. So the map all command and the unmap command only work on this inset window in the middle. It's not going to map everything here to everything there. It's just going to map what I select on the left to what I select here on the right. So again, you could drag and drop, or you can select multiple things here and do a map all. And it's going to ask me to apply. Before you apply, there's LUN numbers. So let's say I want to make these like 31 and up. So you just go click here. And that will be the LUN numbers on the XtremIO side and the LUN numbers on the host side, what are known as host LUN units or LUN numbers. If you want to have like 37 on the XtremIO and a different one on the right, I think it'll let you do that. Or does it change them? No, it does change them both. I was afraid of that. Some arrays will let you do it, some won't. Actually, I think it's a terrible idea. Anybody who's ever cleaned up arrays, it's not a fun idea, but you can do that. So now that these are done, you just say apply, and everything is mapped. From each side, you could say which host are these LUNs mapped to by using this button up here. Actually, if I want to select them all, and it will show them all. You can do the same thing here. So if I want to look at host 5, and this button here would say show all initiator mappings, and it would show all LUNs for that. So really simple. And then the only thing left would be to scan from our host. So let's see here. Let me go to the vCenter client, vSphere 10, do a rescan, and there we are, and give it a second. Now, obviously, I've already, again, zoned on the Fiber Channel Fabric everything through so the host can talk to the XtremIO device. And once that's done, we just, create volumes like we just saw, and then map them on over. And that should be done. So scroll on down. And there's our volumes, 31 through 37, 1 terabyte, and a bunch of 500s. So that's really all there is to it, and then we could start formatting the volumes. So very easy and quick to get this thing stood up and running and mapping volumes. The last thing is really to show you performance monitoring, and you've already seen that from the other lab. But again, now that you've seen volume groups, you've seen initiator groups, keep that in mind because you can create monitors on these initiator group performance, or you can do it on a specific initiator for performance. And you can come down here and do volume folders, specific volumes, anything that you want to do. So we can do volume performance, do a table, pick our new one, and exactly what we want to see. Logical space and use, read-write ops, total read-write ops. Next, and finish. And we have it set to go ahead and start the monitor, and off they go. Nothing going on since I haven't formatted it yet, but it would fill up as hosts started to access it. So keep that in mind. You can do things with the folders or specific, so that's why it's a good idea to set up your folders correctly. That way, if you want to do the monitors, you can only look at what you want to see. So that's it for the demo. Really, this is like the easiest storage array that I've ever worked with. Once you configure this guy, you have one big bucket of storage here to start using and start carving up. Notice our capacity went up a little bit there. And you can just start assigning, host to storage, and away you go. Nothing else to configure, nothing else to worry about. So that's it for the lab. Let's go back to the slides.